You don't improvise on camera when we're shooting. They all think that Marty just doesn't do anything, that he lets the actor say, okay, go ahead, and he sits there like this, and enjoys it. It's not true. I mean, it's so crazy to think that you can go in there and make a movie like that. It has to be structured. You're still saying a script.
I said, all right, I'll tell you something. Go f*** your mother.
Goodfellas. You know it, you've seen it, you've quoted it, talked about it, you had a poster of it in your college dorm room, and I would say it sits proudly near the top of the, if I catch it on TV, I'm gonna sit my ass down and finish it list. Even if it's the dubbed TBS version.
I said, all right, I'll tell you something. Go feed your mother.
Is he saying feed your mother or feel your mother? Either way, hey, solid dub. Like everybody, I grew up watching this movie on repeat, but as I've gotten older, one thing I'm particularly interested in is the acting. I've listened to Ray Liotta's voice so much, I feel like I'm doing Ray Liotta. I grew up watching this movie on repeat, but as I've gotten older, one thing I'm particularly interested in is the acting. More specifically, how each actor approached their character to achieve this raw, natural kind of performance that just served the whole movie well. I've always heard little snippets about how this and that was improvised, or how De Niro did a ton of research, but I've never really dug into it until now. Using clips from the DVD commentary, making-of featurettes, as well as the incredibly detailed making-of book Made Men: The Story of Goodfellas by Glenn Kenny, I'm really excited to show you guys how everyone in the main cast had this just a different way of working and approaching their character, and like a slowly simmered meat sauce, all the different methods employed by the cast, as well as Martin Scorsese, came together to just make a feast for the audience. So let's take a deep dive into the acting methods of the cast of Goodfellas. And as always, I want to give a special thanks to our patrons over on the Back Focus Patreon. Check it out if you'd like to help support this channel.
You took your first pace like a man, and you learned the two greatest things in life.
What?
Never rat on your friends, and always keep your mouth shut.
Starting with good old Bobby De Niro. Marty wanted him from the start. They obviously had a good working relationship after some other films you may have heard of.
Harder.
We had similar interests. He knew where I came from, I knew where he came from. He understood the area I grew up in, and I just think that they reflect those dilemmas, those conflicts, that behavior.
And when De Niro joined the team, as Sean Levy wrote in his 2014 biography of De Niro, he, quote, dove into preparing for the part of Jimmy the Gent with a vigor he hadn't demonstrated in years. De Niro was extremely thorough in his research, preparation, and performance, like maybe one step away from Daniel Day-Lewis. Like he wasn't necessarily in character all the time, he didn't go around set telling people, hey, you call me Jimmy, I only answer to Jimmy, who are you? What are this modern technology? I'm in 1965, what's going on? But his meticulous work and the accuracy he strove for was incredible.
Bob found his character in little things, by the watch, the jacket, the tie, the haircut. He feels the character. He knows who the character is, down to whether he's got manicured fingernails or not.
As far as research, he of course read the book Wise Guy by Nicholas Pileggi, which the movie's based on. I mean, everybody did. That should be the minimum amount of research you have to do. He made efforts to talk to the real Jimmy, but he said because he was in prison it was complicated and he couldn't end up doing it. But one person he could go to, and went to relentlessly to mine material, was the real Henry Hill, who was paid almost $500,000 as a consultant for the film. It's a lot of money, but it didn't end up being an easy job.
We call you 4 or 5 times a day?
You know, in the mornings before he would...
Wow.
Henry earned every penny. Sure, he was available when Scorsese needed to ask him something, periodically, but he was especially busy with De Niro, who would call him with questions about Jimmy, like, almost every day. In Henry Hill's book, Gangsters and Goodfellas, he recalls, quote, I was getting 10 phone calls a day from De Niro or Scorsese, and my own phone bill was $4,000 plus a month, which Scorsese covered. The laugh wasn't in the quote. De Niro even called Hill during the birth of his new child. Quote, I'm telling Bobby how to pistol whip a guy's head at the same time my new kid's head is popping out. You could say it ruined the moment. So the question is, what did De Niro want to know? The answer is everything possible.
How does Jimmy hold a cigarette? How do you think he reacted, when he seen
Johnny Roast Beef, pull up with the Cadillac, and how he held the shot glass, what kind of a face he made. I mean, all of these crazy, I thought they were crazy questions at the time. But, and then I started to get the hang of it, and, I knew what he was requesting, and, and I was able to, participate, and it was rewarding, and I got paid for it.
Among some of De Niro's actual handwritten notes, there were things like, lots of bets, he liked to laugh, when drunk, a little loud, dozen roses to mothers of guys in can, glide, little bounce, always shaking hands, didn't like strangers, good dresser, a rebel but respectful, my mind was on making scores, not so much a woman. Wise Guy author Nicholas Pileggi even recalls how De Niro called Henry to ask him exactly how Jimmy would try to get ketchup out of a bottle.
Jimmy used ketchup, how did he do it? He said, he did it that way. And so in the movie, Bob does it that way. And I watched it and I said, ooh, that just gave it an authenticity to detail.
Had it been the usual pat on the bottle or using a knife to get the little air pocket out, it wouldn't have been that interesting. But he does this unique rolling method. I've never seen another human being extrude ketchup from a bottle as if he's trying to start a fire. And his clothes. De Niro made extensive notes in the margins of his script for each scene about which outfit he would wear. It would depend on the time period, the occasion, and he would match clothes to go with specific rings. Now, some of these might have changed slightly when shooting began, but still, this was one look. Green suit, snakeskin belt, black shoes, watch on left hand, black silk socks, brown silver tie, no ring. And then much later, in a different time period, number 52, Jimmy, 1965, summer, tattoos, hair back, clean shave, white shirt, with red stripe. De Niro also insisted on using real money, specifically for this scene where he's just throwing it around. Hey, you get some money. Here you go. Yeah, push some down. This was a little stressful for property master Bob Griffin, who withdrew $2,000 from his personal savings account for this scene, which he quickly retrieved from everybody involved after each take because, as some of these extras were legitimate criminals, there was a very real chance some of his completely uninsured cash would disappear. All of these little things, the costumes, the ketchup bottle, even the amount of silver gray in his hair, which he was very particular about. They all suggest that De Niro, at least in this film, kind of had this method of working from the outside in. From the book, Glenn Kenny writes, quote, "He is not interested in abstractions. Psychology for him is articulated via gesture and action, and is most vividly amplified through personal appearance/presentation." Another thing De Niro had learned at this point was to rail against the natural instinct of an actor to do more.
That's really the strongest way to go, most powerful way to go, just not to do anything. And it's very hard for actors in general to feel that they're doing enough, whereas all they have to do is nothing, and that's all that's needed. And that in itself is something to learn or realize as an actor, especially in films. So that's sometimes when you use non-actors, they don't even think that way. And you can get a very strong presence without any of the other stuff that comes along with it, like I should be doing this or that,
That's so true, and having a non-actor in a scene can actually help, depending on the situation. For example, remember the guy who immediately bought the pink Cadillac after the Lufthansa heist? Johnny Roast Beef. Well, this guy's real name was Johnny Williams, and he was certainly not an actor. In a GQ article, Williams recalls, quote, "Here's a guy who's done 200 films, and here I am. I own the deli up in Harlem. I don't act, but he needed a fuse, he needed a light, and he says, Johnny, somewhere, I don't care where it is, just tell me not to get excited." And that helped.
What are you getting excited for? What am I getting excited about? Because you're going to get us all pinched, that's why. What are you, stupid? I'm sorry, Jimmy. What's his name? What'd you say? Are you being a wise guy with me?
In the same article, De Niro said, quote, "I would hope that anything that I was doing was helping him, and he was helping me. He was very good just reacting. I was the more kind of dominant, aggressive person in the scene because I was chewing him out. So all he had to do was just react, and the best thing is to do nothing and just sort of take it. And that's how those things happen in life, usually." One last thing I'd like to mention about De Niro is that his relationship with Joe Pesci added a whole other level of realism that he could bring to Jimmy. De Niro remembers this scene vividly and recalls in that same GQ interview, quote, "One of the hardest scenes for me was when I heard that Joe's character was killed. to be crying and emotionally really upset. I tried my best. I might have wanted to get even further than I did in it, not expressing just the anger, but the emotional distraughtness, if you will. For my character, for him, because they were close. It takes a lot out of you emotionally. Either you're there or you're trying to get there, but both of those processes take a lot out of you. DP Michael Ballhaus would later add, quote, "I think we shot that scene only once. He was so much into it that you couldn't do it again." I love that Robert De Niro just went all in on this, and knowing that he was this detail-oriented just makes me enjoy his performance even more. Because even though I know a little bit of the magic, it makes it exciting to know that there are so many other layers at play. Like we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Ray Liotta. It's impossible to imagine anybody else playing this role. He put such a firm stamp on it, and the real Henry Hill has been on record multiple times praising how accurate his portrayal was, right down to that laugh.
You got that laugh down to a science.
I did?
Yeah, you really did, because Henry does, that is Henry's laugh.
Yeah. I think he's using mine.
But the thing is, Ray didn't get so much into the nitty-gritty like De Niro did, although he may have if he was allowed to.
If you touch her again, you're dead! Oh.
He was eager to meet Henry Hill when he was doing research, but Marty decided against it. I call him Marty like I know him. Sir Martin Scorsese decided against it, as he didn't want it to affect Ray's performance.
Well, I talked with Nick Pileggi, who interviewed Henry. So Nick gave me hours and hours and hours of cassettes to listen to.
You have to talk to the real people, and that's where you get all that attention to detail that Marty just leaps on. That's what we want, and it just lends a reality to it. And why not? The people you're talking to are the real people. They really did it.
Just give us the f***ing money! Huh? I can't.
I would just listen to the cassettes. I would just put it in my mother's car whenever I was driving around. Just listen to Henry, being interviewed by Nick, and it was great doing it. But it was also Henry. For some reason, he just ate potato chips the whole time while he was listening. That chomping of the potato chips was kind of like insightful in terms of who he was and how he didn't care how he was coming across. He was just telling the stories of his life.
Interestingly, Ray seemed to just put a lot of himself into the role. He obviously wasn't concerned with his performance being an imitation of Henry. Like, his voice is actually completely different from Henry, who actually sounds more like Joe Pesci with like this thick, somewhat high-register New York accent.
It was a middle-class, blue-collar neighborhood. Everybody knew everybody on the fucking block, and, they knew everybody's cousins and uncles and where the they came from.
Also, something that helped Ray's performance was the camaraderie between himself, De Niro, and Joe Pesci. There was a lot of laughing on set. The three of them got along so well. It's just the boys hanging out, telling jokes. And look, there's something to be said about how that off-screen chemistry can affect what's on screen.
What's wrong with you? Henry,
Shut up.
You're not normal. She's right. What's wrong with you, Henry? What kind of person are you? What is the matter with you?
According to first director Joseph Ridey, from his perspective, these scenes with the boys, they're just carrying on, they seemed easier on Ray.
What do you like, the leg or the wing, Henry? Or you still go for the old hearts and long? Oh, that's so bad.
Unlike the more emotional scenes with Lorraine Bracco as Karen, quote, people were unhappy, they brought a lot of anger into the room. And those moments when he was coke-addled toward the end there, that was rough stuff. One thing that may have added to the stress of the infamous cocaine sequence is that, according to Isaiah Whitlock Jr., who played the kind-hearted doctor to Henry, Ray had been up all night to appear sleep-deprived. Now, I don't really know how that worked, because this whole sequence was shot over the course of several days. Maybe he was getting little power naps in here and there, and was just trying to be as sleepy as possible. Another thing that Ray had to work on that was unique only to him and Lorraine Bracco is that he had to go into a studio for a day or two to provide the narration for the entire film. And voiceover is just a whole other little ballgame. It can be difficult even to go in for looping and try to tap into that same energy you had in a scene just to pick up a line or two. Ray recalled having trouble with this at first.
And so I just started, as far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be. Again, I wasn't feel like I was connecting. So I asked, like you or it was a sound guy, if he would sit in front of me. And that gave me a focus. So then, because what I'm doing is basically I'm telling that story, because when you pull back off the witness stand, you can see that I'm talking to the camera. So I figured I'd use that, and I'd want to talk to somebody. So I said, can I start it again? I don't feel like right. And I sat down and started telling this guy that I didn't know, the sound guy, the story.
This is actually a common technique utilized by voiceover artists. So what helps is to, at the very least, imagine who you're talking to, a single person, and deliver your lines as if you're talking to them. It could be your friend, your mother, a therapist, a priest, and any of those options could change your delivery. For Ray, he was talking to a sound guy, but maybe he was imagining that he was talking to some guy in a bar, or he's confessing everything to a DEA agent, or he's talking to Nicholas Pileggi, who's writing a book about him. I mean, whatever he did, it worked, and his narration of the story feels so natural that on the most basic of levels, you're just drawn into the world of a storyteller.
Right after I got here, I ordered some spaghetti with marinara sauce, and I got egg noodles and ketchup. I'm an average nobody. I get to live the rest of my life like a schnook.
But there is something about Ray Liotta's performance that can't really be taught. I mean, he was solid, professional, locked into his role completely, but at the end of the day, he had a quality about him that lent itself naturally to playing Henry, being an outsider. This is something that famed director Martin Scorsese and producer Irwin Winkler have cited as a strength of his for the role.
Henry's character is somebody who grows up with these guys and is very much a part of them, but he's slightly outside of it. And that was part of the quality that Ray has always had. That's why I think he was so perfectly cast. You would never have bought the Bob De Niro character or the Joe Pesci character doing it, but you did buy Ray's character doing it.
And there it is, it's that 5% of luck that just an actor has no control over. He naturally had qualities that Marty was eager to use in his film. In a 2023 interview for Variety, Marty said, quote, "Yes, his manner and his appearance and the quality of his voice meant that he was cast more often as tough guys than in pictures like Field of Dreams. But that's true for every actor. It was his fearlessness, combined with his control and his intelligence, that made him so great."
I know there are women like my best friends who would have gotten out of there the minute their boyfriend gave them a gun to hide. But I didn't. I gotta admit the truth. It turned me on.
All right, let's talk about Karen. Karen,
will you grow up?
Karen is not your average do-nothing female character, right? She's fiery, opinionated, she easily gets caught up in the lavish lifestyle, using her fingers to illustrate to Henry exactly how big of a stack of money she wants to go shopping. She's a protective mama bear, she fights for her kids, fights to get her husband back from whatever floozy he's messing around with.
I'm gonna tell everyone who walks in this building that until Rossi, you are nothing but a whore!
Is this the superintendent?
Yes, I want you to know, sir, that you have a whore living in Toa!
And despite the ugliness, she just can't help but be madly in love with this guy and even becomes his partner in crime. In short, Karen is a fighter, and the same can be said about Lorraine Bracco.
You got some nerve standing me up. Nobody does that to me. Who the hell do you think you are? Frankie Valli or some kind of big shot?
In preparing for the role, Marty gave her a note that helped her immensely.
He gave me fabulous direction for Karen. He said she's the movie star. She's the star, of Henry's life.
This one direction was a jumping-off point for Lorraine to explore Karen's world. She also used music to help her get into character, which can always be helpful.
I used a lot of Bette Midler in The Rose. She sings about, when a man loves a woman and...
For those who haven't seen The Rose, it's not just the music that can relate to Karen's state of mind. I suspect that the entire movie was an inspiration for Lorraine in her portrayal. As far as what Lorraine fought for, from day one, similar to De Niro's chase for authenticity above all, she would go to Marty with She would go to Martin Scorsese. I'm just going to say Marty, I don't care. I'm going to act like I know him on a first name basis. She would go to Marty with requests for her portrayal of Karen. Some of the things she wanted, she brought her real kids in for several scenes. As a father, I can only imagine how much realism that could add to a performance. For example, like when she's visiting Henry in prison, I'm sure the overwhelming feeling of loneliness and isolation of suddenly having to be a single parent was easy to tap into. And the fury that comes with having her deadbeat husband asking her to smuggle in cheese so he and the boys can have a nice Italian dinner. And hey, De Niro wanted real money? Well, hey, Lorraine wanted real jewelry.
The guys used real money. So I said, well, I want real jewelry. I was like, yeah, I want the real thing. It makes me feel different, better, snazzier. I like that.
Also, something we haven't touched on yet, but there's this whole added layer of material for some of the actors to tap into, and that's their real-world experience. De Niro, Pesci, and Marty all grew up in certain parts of New York with at least a peripheral awareness of organized crime, and an up-close and personal experience with the melting pot of different cultures, Italian, Jewish, etc. Lorraine was no different. Lorraine Bracco's performance is kind of a chicken or the egg situation. It seems like she already had this kind of personality, this innate firecracker quality about her. Then again, maybe in her research and preparation, bits of Karen's personality bled into her real life, making her confident and comfortable enough to speak out on her interpretation of Karen and what she needed to help get her into that headspace. Maybe at the end of the day, it was just a little bit of both.
Shane, Oklahoma kid, that's me. I'm the Oklahoma kid. Yeah. Now he's moving.
Joe Pesci's Oscar-winning performance as Tommy DeVito was arguably the result of two important techniques. First of all, unlike De Niro, Pesci did not obsess over intricate details. If De Niro worked from the outside in, it can be said that Pesci's approach was to work from the inside out. In Mary Pat Kelly's book, Martin Scorsese, A Journey, Pesci said, quote, "People ask me if I want to know about the real Tommy DeSimone. I know a lot about him. I read and I talk to people, but I don't take that stuff into the film with me. Now Bob De Niro will find out everything about his characters and take those traits and little things with them and let us start to feel like that for him. What I do is think of somebody that I know very well who is the same type and play him. I do my Tommy DeSimone. I do Joe Pesci as if he were this killer, this crazy, funny, wisecracking person." I've never done a good Joe Pesci. It's mediocre at best. Something internal that also helped was Pesci's admitted hot-headed nature. In the same interview, he said, quote, "I can draw on my temper because it's terrible. My father had a terrible one, and my brother and I have it too. I have to calm myself down. I've learned as I've gotten older to control it or to walk away from people, to stay clear of somebody that I don't like, that will upset me in a way that would make me want to strangle them or beat them to a pulp. So as Tommy, I use those urges to kill. It becomes nothing after a while. I did one of those murders like it was absolutely nothing." The other skill in Pesci's toolbox that came in handy was, of course, comedy. He actually had a comedy background. The actor who played Billy Batts, Frank Vincent, had known Pesci for years at the time of filming, and the two of them had formed a comedy duo years prior. You can kind of tell that these two had chemistry in the Shinebox scene.
Oh, come here.
Pesci already had this sharp comedic timing, but the fact that they were friends, and according to Pesci, knew how to get on each other's nerves, was just icing on the cake for their infamous confrontation.
I'm sorry, too. It's okay, no problem.
Okay, salute. Now go home and get your fucking shine box.
Now let's get to the improv. I think a lot of people, myself included, assumed that a lot of what was on screen was improvised.
Funny how? I mean, what's funny about it?
Especially the iconic funny guy scene.
I'm funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you. I make you laugh. I'm here to fucking amuse you.
That is actually completely wrong. The only scene in the film that was truly improvised as the cameras were rolling was when our boys have dinner with Tommy's mother.
Ma, it's a sin. You gotta leave it there, you know.
And this was only because Scorsese had perfectly cast his mother Catherine in the part, and he knew that she was comfortable in front of the camera playing a version of herself, this just sweet, doting Italian mother, and gave them all the situation and just let them riff at the table with a two-camera setup.
Why don't you get yourself a nice girl?
I get a nice one almost every night, Ma.
Yeah, but get yourself a girl so you could settle down.
That's what I settle down almost every night, but then in the morning I'm free. I love you.
But the funny guy scene, right? I mean, this whole situation was something that Pesci had actually experienced, by the way. Liotta said that he was on the receiving end of it. Other reports from Scorsese say that he witnessed it between two other guys, but either way, it's only partially true that this was improvised. In reality, the funny guy scene came to life in an improvisational rehearsal and was recorded, then transcribed by Scorsese and locked into the script by the time they started shooting. There was very little, if anything, that was improvised on the day.
Get the fuck out of here, Tommy.
On the contrary, Scorsese actually had to keep Pesci and Liotta from going too far off script.
It started to go another way, and I kept saying, no, you got to go back to the script based on what was rewritten. He had already hit those levels, Joe, and we needed those levels. Otherwise, if you look at the scene, it could be very sloppy. You know, you could just say, what do you think, I'm funny? And it can go on like that for ages. But there's something there's something in each question and response from Ray that raises the ante until it gets to the point where Ray has no choice but to call him on it.
But the only way you can really be truthful about it is to really not be inhibited by anything.
Which brings us to the backbone of this craziness, and that would be good old Marty himself and how he worked with the actors. First of all, while we're still on the topic of improv, the funny guy scene wasn't the only scene that was the result of an improvised rehearsal.
So we would rehearse 35, 40 minutes a scene, and they were all improvisations. They were very loosely around the script, just sort of what was happening, not improvising by writing lines. I mean, improvising behaviorally. And then he'll see something he likes, and he'll come over and say, you know what you said in that other improvisation? Why don't you say that to him again? Or let him have it.
According to actress Ilena Douglas, every scene went through this improv factory process. From Glenn Kenny's book, quote, the actors were coming in and doing character-based improvs every day, recording the improvs, and then typing them up, incorporating them into the shooting script. So yeah, there was this initial script that everyone followed along with, but they would explore each scene in rehearsal and just come up with little things and little spices to add to the flavor.
That's just the way he is. He's very open to a lot of ideas from anybody.
That was, for an actor, it was like the jackpot.
But there was one other important quality Marty had that gave Goodfellas the authenticity it needed. No, I'm not talking about his personal experience with cocaine, which arguably allowed him to envision a sequence that is so authentic, former cocaine users would tell Ray Liotta that they would watch it to remind themselves of the absolute hell of addiction. It was Marty's open dialogue with the actors and his willingness to let them come to him with any suggestions whatsoever. When I was watching all these behind-the-scenes interviews with the cast, just across the board, they all said the same thing. Marty made them feel comfortable enough to explore, and even when it didn't feel right, he would never make them feel stupid for trying. It's just who he is. He can't help himself. He's just so excited and enthusiastic about the whole collaborative process.
I try to work with people who really want to do it, people who are really enthusiastic and want to be there. You know, if I'll get there in the morning or something and very tired, and the actor says hello, he or she comes up to me and they're all excited about what they're going to do, and that's it. I just suddenly pick up on that and we sail, you know, because you never know what you're going to find.
He's got this enthusiasm and energy that is just unparalleled.
The kid doesn't look like a gangster yet. He has to look, his shoes are going to be shine. Got a pinky ring, kid? Yeah, that's better. I would like it just a little bit. We don't have any stays in the collar?
Yeah, this one doesn't call.
No stays, Christine?
And in the end, his enthusiasm and this intimate knowledge of the time period and culture and an entire spectrum of different approaches from his eager-to-please actors gave birth to a film that has and will always stand the test of time. So yeah, I've watched Goodfellas a lot. We all have. But maybe now we know why.